Hello and welcome to another episode of the Undercurrent Stories podcast, the show where we dive into the hidden depths and discover the stories about the people and the world around us. In fact, today we are literally diving into the surf with my guest, Si Cale. Si is an experienced surf kayaker, and as well as talking about the sport, we'll be talking about the Severn Bore, which is a world-famous tidal surge in the Severn estuary here in the UK, and upon which surfers and kayakers, including Si, surf on. Hello, welcome to the show, Si.
Hi, thank you very much.
Great to have you on. First of all, I did hesitate when I said kayakers, including Si, surf on. Is it ride on, surf on, or have I got it right with surf on?
Yeah, surf. Yeah, kayakers surf the waves. We surf waves on the sea. We surf waves on tidal bores, and surf waves on the rivers as well. You get standing waves on rivers.
Well, thank you ever so much for coming on the show. It's great to have you on. And I ought to give a shout out and a special thanks to our mutual friend, Ben Wilding, for introducing us.
Good old Ben.
Before we talk about the Severn Bore, could you just tell us a bit about yourself, please, Si? You know, your life's journey and how you eventually became interested in surf kayaking.
My whole life, I've managed to get access to water in holidays and with friends. And fortunately, when I was younger, some of my friends were really good sailors and taught me how to windsurf and sail and be safe in the water from sort of the age of 5 onwards. And over the years, it became a really fun thing to do in my spare time. So I did a lot of windsurfing and then eventually went to university and started to learn outdoor education at university as part of my degree. And with that, I got various qualifications to become a windsurfing instructor, kayak instructor, and linked that with a teaching certificate as well. And that's also where I met Ben Wilding, because I worked for Outward Bound as one of my first jobs. And so we share a passion for the outdoors and for water sports. And over the years, I've, carried on climbing and kayaking and walking on hills and mountaineering as well. But for me, the kayaking is something which you can do quite easily. You can just pop to a beach and go surfing. Rivers, you really need to be with somebody else if possible. But when you're surfing on the sea, you can pick a nice, safe beach and pop in. And with the technology these days, the wetsuits and the gear that we wear is really warm, so you can do it all the year round. So that's the one I've sort of stuck with, and that and sea kayaking as well is another wonderful way of getting around. Sea kayaks are much longer than normal kayaks. They're also called Eskimo kayaks. You see a picture of the Eskimos with these long sea kayaks, and that's where that came from. And they're designed to travel long journeys, and you can pack up a sea kayak with expedition kit for a few days and travel miles and miles.
And what's the difference between a surf kayak and a sea kayak?
So a surf kayak it's a bit like a normal canoe that you see people paddling, and but underneath the surf kayak, it's got some fins that you can put on. So like a surfboard would have a fin underneath at the back. And that fin basically just keeps you going in a straight line. It gives you a rudder at the back of your kayak or your surfboard. And so surf kayaks are really shaped like surfboards, but you sit in them or on them. And so we don't stand up, whereas surfers will paddle, lying down, and then they'll stand up on their surfboard. So the surf kayak is a specialist version of a normal plastic kayak or fiberglass kayak, and we tend to use them to go diagonally on a wave. So when you're catching a wave that's breaking, you really want to be on the green bit, not the white broken bit. So you're like a surfer, you're going sideways on the wave to grab that green bit of the water. It's called the shoulder in between the green and the white water that's breaking as well. And you can travel long distances, it's usually near a reef or it's near on a sandy beach with a sandbar, and you can travel long distances along the wave and do some tricks or just get a nice long ride. And the edge of the surf kayak will tend to be a little bit more at right angles, so you can just bite into the side of the wave a bit as well, which means you're not slipping down and losing the wave.
Oh, I see. So the surf kayak is designed to travel in a straight line as you surf along the wave.
Yeah, so you can either travel in a straight line, sort of 30 degrees onto the wave, or if you're just going straight down a big wave and go straight towards the beach, that's 90 degrees and straight. And you tend to go straight into the beach if there's a massive wave behind you that's about to break. So you would zoom in to try and stop the wave breaking on you, and then it'll just push you in.
Yeah. And are there these canoes or kayaks, have they been developed fairly recently?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say they've been around since the 60s, I'd say, and used to be sort of homemade, and also something called a wave ski, which is like a surf kayak or a surfboard that you sit on. A wave ski has a strap that you put across your waist, and that means you're not sitting inside a kayak. And they developed in the 60s and the 70s. A lot of them were homemade, made of fiberglass, and people use them. That basically, if you have a paddle that you use, which you do in kayaking, it's a bit easier to get out into the waves and to catch waves than it is if you're just surfing and just using your hands to get the momentum up to catch the wave. So it tended to originate from canoeists that were doing more time on the waves on the beaches or on the rivers, that then wanted to specialize their boats a bit in order to make the most of a wave. And that's where surf kayaking came from.
I've seen some videos of you surfing the Severn Bore, but first of all, just for listeners' benefit, I mean, I think we've all heard of the Severn Bore. We see it as this big sort of wave that comes along the Severn. Could you just tell us where it is and how it came to be and what it does?
So the Severn Bore travels up the River Severn. The River Severn is near Bristol, a Severn estuary, and it travels up, goes past Bristol and travels up in a funnel-shaped estuary, getting narrow as it goes up towards Gloucester. And Gloucester is really where the estuary turns into a river, and then it goes past Gloucester and carries on up. It's navigable right down near the Severn Bridge, and then there's a canal that takes it up past Gloucester, because the tidal range on the Severn estuary is very high. So when the tide's in, it's very high. When the tide's out, it's sandy and rocky, and the difference is about 50 foot between tide in and tide out. So it's a huge tidal range. It's the third biggest tidal range in the world, and the biggest one is in Alaska. And actually, in Alaska, they've also got some quite good tidal bores that go up their rivers. So we're lucky to have such a huge tidal range that creates an amazing phenomenon on the River Severn, up the Severn estuary, as the tide's coming in. And it's that surge in the tide as it's coming in, called a tidal bore, which creates the right factors for a little wave to form on the front of the incoming tide as it's narrowing up the channel going towards Gloucester. And as the estuary narrows, the funnel also narrows, and as the tide's coming in, all that water that's coming in has got less area to go, and so it tends to fall over itself on the front of the wave and create a couple of feet difference between in front of the wave going upstream and behind the wave downstream where the tide's coming in. And that's the tidal bore. And you get tidal bores on most estuary rivers, actually, but they may only be a couple of centimetres high or 6 inches high. But there's there's lots of them all around the country. The River Dee has got the Dee Bore. That's a good one. The River Trent has got Trent Eiger, which is another bore that comes up. And so all around the country there are these little bores that come in as the tide turns.
How often does the Severn Bore come into existence?
So the bore basically times itself around the every 4 weeks, which is the same cycle that the sun and the moon use in terms of when the tide's going to be high, when tide's going to be low, when there's going to be a large tide, when there's going to be a small tide. So a large tide is called a spring tide, which happens once every 4 weeks, and a small tide is called a neap tide, which happens once every 4 weeks. But there's basically, within the 4 weeks, you get 2 weeks of the tides going down towards neaps, and then 2 weeks of the tides coming up towards springs. And we will wait for those spring tides on the 4 weeks. And within the year, there's probably 4 very big tides where basically the sun and the moon in relation to the earth in the middle creates a gravitational pull. And when they all align in the right way, you get bigger tides. And it's those bigger tides that we would use to get on a tidal wave, a tidal bore that's coming up the estuary. The larger spring tides form in the spring and the autumn, which are around the equinoxes. But basically, within a year, you will get 12 spring tides because there's 12 months. And of those 12 spring tides...
But there's probably only, what you're saying is there's probably only 4 really good ones to surf on?
Well, on paper, when you're looking at your tidal charts, there might be 4 really good ones to surf on. But as usual, there's lots of other factors that come into it. So the height of the tide is only one of the factors. The other things that affect the height of the wave, the tidal bore, is the weather and the wind. So if there's a low pressure out in the Atlantic near to the River Severn estuary, that low pressure will pull the water up, and that creates a bigger wave. If the wind's blowing up the estuary, then that will potentially create a bigger wave. Or if the wind's blowing down the estuary, it will potentially create a bigger wave. The one thing it is, over all the years I've done it, is it's always different. So you can never really tell, but you can put all these factors together and have a pretty good guess of what it's going to be like.
And how many years have you been surfing the bore?
So I was thinking about this. I started when I was a teenager. We lived in the area, and I think I saw a leaflet or a little article in the paper and got me interested. So I wrote to the water board. I don't know if it was called the Environment Agency back then, because we're talking 40 years ago. And they sent me through a leaflet, which was a leaflet on when the high tides are for the River Severn and when the bores are. And it was that leaflet that I used to just go down to the river. And I had a windsurfer, and I just literally popped it in the water and went into the middle, and then this little wave came up. And then after that, because I got given the little chart through the post, it said there's another bore in 2 months' time. So I thought, I'll go down for that as well. So I went down with a mate of mine called Davey Larkin, who's a very good kayaker, and we were both really good kayakers at that time. And it was the middle of the summer, and we just thought we'd just go and give it a go. We arrived late in the evening, and basically the tide comes in and out twice over the period of 24 hours. So there's a morning bore and there's an evening bore. There's a morning tide coming up, there's an evening tide coming up. So we were late. So we decided we'd go in the estuary at about 9 o'clock at night, and the bore was coming through at 9:30, 10, and it was dark. So we had head torches on, and we got in our kayaks, and we had no idea what we were doing. We got in the estuary, and I said, it'll be fine. There's nothing to worry about. and we heard this roar like about 20 minutes before it arrived, and we thought it was a train coming up the side because there's a railway next to the estuary. And it got louder and louder and louder. And then we were looking at each other because we'd have a plan, which was basically just to hit the white water and go sideways up and keep an eye on each other. And immediately the plan went to pot because this massive wave hit us sideways, all white water. We were just in plastic boats, no fins at the back.
And what sort of size was the wave as it hit you?
So probably 2 foot, 2.5 foot. So if you're sitting in a kayak, it would be head high. So you, like when you sit on the seats, head high. So when you're in a kayak looking at this thing, it's quite scary because and we didn't know, but in the estuary the wave tends to be more broken, so white water in the estuary, and then because it's not very deep channel, and then as you go up into the river it becomes more green. So we just got washed up, and we managed to keep looking at each other for a bit, and then I capsized, came off the wave, managed to roll up, which is a really important thing to be able to do if you're a kayaker on the Bore. And Davey just disappeared into the darkness. I didn't see him for ages, and just saw this dot in the distance. And then I thought, I'll just paddle up and see if I can find him in the dark. And then as I was paddling up the estuary, the wave had reformed behind me because I went by a sandbar, and I got back on the wave again and was going up. But we eventually found each other after about an hour, and we had no idea where we were, in the middle of nowhere. And it took about 2 hours to get to the bank, walk all the way back to the car. But we really enjoyed it. It was extremely dangerous and a foolhardy thing to do, because obviously one of us had come out, and you just would be lost. But the next day it was daylight.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely amazing. What does it feel like when you're actually surfing on it?
The reason I've done it for over 40 years is because the feeling you get when you're on it is absolutely wonderful. It's like an old friend, really, and it's predictable. So it might be late, it might be early, but there's always something going to happen. And that feeling of when you get it all right and you're in the right spot, because basically there's about 20 miles of estuary to choose from, and you can catch it 2 or 3 times during about a 3-hour period that it's going up the estuary. When you get it right, you can be on the wave for 20 minutes, half an hour, and having an amazing surf, sometimes with other people as well. And that's really fun when you do have other people. I like having mainly surfers next to me because there's not many kayakers that do the Bore. It's quite a specialist thing. And I like filming them. I like not necessarily filming myself, but actually filming the wave and filming the surfers. And then the reason I do that is because you manage to have a look at it later and you've got a record of it. And it's a very special phenomenon. And it's wedged in culture and history and danger and fun and beauty, because in the morning when you're surfing it up the estuary, it's 6 o'clock, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. The sun's rising in the east, the moon's setting in the west, and if it's an autumn spring tide, you get a beautiful full moon setting as well. So it's something that you just get drawn to time and time again, if you do get hooked, and then you're away.
Hi, it's Bob here. Just a quick interlude. Hope you're enjoying this episode. And if you would like to hear more interesting interviews, we have over 100 episodes to date with many fascinating guests talking about a wide variety of topics, which include music, history, philosophy, fitness, food and drink, adventure, contemporary culture, and many, many more. I'm sure there's something that you'd really enjoy. So all you need to do is just visit undercurrentstories.com or search Undercurrent Stories in any of the podcast platforms. And now back to the show. Yeah, I suppose you're riding with nature in many ways, aren't you? You've got the countryside all around you. and you've got this
Yeah.
natural phenomenon which you're on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally natural. It's your own power. The bore travels at 12 miles an hour, which is faster than you
12
can
miles
run.
an hour. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's an annual run that they do, a 10K run next to the Severn Bore on the bank, and the runners can't keep up with it, and it's quite scary when you're on the wave and you're near the bank because it's moving so fast, and there are lots of obstacles in the way, and floating wood and floating fridges and all sorts of things coming past.
You mentioned there about the history. Could you elaborate a little bit about the history of surfing on the Bore?
Yeah, so it's obviously got a history going back millennia, and in the very old days, I mean, it's an extremely dangerous wave that nobody knew when it was coming. So it was the thing that if you weren't local, you were basically going to be in big trouble, because people used to bring sailing boats up the River Severn, and shipping companies used to be operating there. So in days gone by, an extremely dangerous place for sailors to be, for boats to be. And in more recent times, it's obviously caught the eye of people who've seen this wave coming up. So people started getting interested in it in the early 1900s, and to start to see if they could go out and catch it. And that's really when people started going out and looking at what could they use to ride it besides a rowing boat, or whatever it was they were using. There's a guy called Colonel Mad Jack Churchill, and in 1955 he's got the first recorded record of surfing the Severn Bore on a homemade surfboard. And he was an officer in the army, I think, and he was a crazy guy. He did a lot of crazy things. So this was right up his street to come down and surf the Severn Bore. Yeah, that's the first recorded one. And then during the 60s, Beach Boys records, surfing started in Hawaii, 50s and 60s. That then came to Gloucester and Bristol and the River Severn, and surfers started to go onto the Severn Bore, and that's when they started recording it. So there's this old Pathé newsreels of people going out and surfing the Bore. Tended to be people from abroad, like from Hawaii, that came over and did it.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, there's other records going back as well of the Bore catching people unawares, and also records of possible tsunamis on the River Severn as it comes up, so caused by earthquakes out in the Atlantic or through floods. And there's a church down on the River Severn that's got a stained glass window with a big wave on the window, and people basically looking like they're drowning in cottages.
Oh, right.
And they think that's a record of a tsunami coming up the estuary, which again would have been totally unexpected, and obviously people couldn't swim in those days. So there's been a long history of the waves on the River Severn. The river's got a name as well. The goddess of the river is called Sabrina. So a lot of locals refer to the River Severn as Sabrina, and and it's got quite a cult following in sort of mythical worlds, and it's not that far from Glastonbury and that whole Avalon area, and I like that as well. It brings a nice mystical quality to the wave.
And you mentioned there about surfers. You're obviously kayaking on it. Are there many more surfers than kayakers?
Yeah, there's a handful of kayakers and a lot of surfers. We all tend to be local or people who know the Bore and have done it for many years. And then you get the new people who come in to try it, and they might stay and then come back year after year, but that doesn't happen very much. And mainly the surfers that surf the Bore are local surfers, tends to be blokes mainly. And they're a lovely group of guys who are all very passionate about the River Severn, about conservation, and about each other. And they call themselves the Muddy Brothers. And it's a self-help group which offers support to each other, and that, because a lot of the time in all of our lives there's a lot of stuff that we go through, and mental health's a really big issue, and a lot of the guys are always there on the networks if you need to reach out to them, and they meet up as well regularly, and have a lovely way of celebrating the Severn Bore, and we have a dinner once a year at Christmas. Right. They fundraise for charities. They fundraised last year for the Wave project in Bristol for young people who couldn't afford it to go and have an experience on the Wave project, which is an artificial wave near Bristol. And they're a very active group. Most of them are working, doing some sort of trade or professional work, or retired. One of the guys that's there has got the record for the longest surf, something like 7.6 miles on a tidal bore.
So I was going to ask about competition. So the competition is to basically see how far you can travel, is it?
Well, it's not really a competition, but everybody likes, when you're surfing the Bore, it's always nice to try and go as far as possible. And because you can catch it 2 or 3 times, what you tend to do is drive to wherever you're going to put in on the river, and then drift down to the point at which you're going to catch the Bore, and then surf it back up the river with the incoming tide, roughly to where you got in before, and hop in the car and drive up and surf it again. That is always on your mind. How far can I get? Can I get a bit further than last time? And the personal best is always nice to beat. So it's all very individual. However, because of the shape of the Bore and the estuary, there's this potential for a long ride. And Steve King, who's a local guy who still surfs the Bore, very active, he got the record for 7.6 miles on a standing up on a surfboard doing the tidal wave, and that record was got about a long time ago, 15 years ago, something like that, maybe more.
Yeah, and that distance over 12 miles an hour, that's quite a long time, isn't it, on your board?
Yeah, it is.
What's your own record, Si?
My own record is probably about 40 minutes on the Bore, so 40 or 50 minutes. And
that's a long time.
It is a long time, and you catch it low down in the estuary, and then if everything works out well, you can basically map your way around the sandbars and head upstream, and you just don't know if it's going to happen or not.
Just for listeners' benefit, I would urge, and we'll put the notes on at the end of the show, I'd urge listeners to have a look at some of Si's videos, because my perception was you get on the wave and you travel in your kayak, and that's it. But you are, working with that wave all the time, aren't you? I mean, high concentration levels.
Yeah, very much so. The wave's always changing. You need to be in the right spot to keep going on the wave. If you lose momentum on the wave, then you can come off it. If you come off the back of the wave, it's really hard to catch it up again and get back on. So you're constantly having to pick the right spot on the wave. And you just want to be on the shoulder of the wave where the white water and the green water mix, and on the river. And
you have to stay on that shoulder throughout the journey.
On the river where the banks are steep, and then you have the bed of the river. You want to be on the bank, just where it breaks or the white water turns to green. In the estuary, it's flatter. It's wider. Yeah. So you tend, if you're on a green wave on the estuary, you don't need to worry so much about the shoulder. And when the river's narrow and it's shallow, say in the summer, then you can get more of an estuary ride towards the top section where it will break all the way across the river.
And how do the kayakers and the surfers get on with each other?
Well, that's a very good question, Bob. And the answer is they don't get on very well. We love the surfers, but surfers don't really like kayakers. And they've got a fair point. A kayak tends to be quite uncontrolled, and if it's not in the right hands, the kayak, usually it will be a novice who's got a plastic kayak and they won't have fins on the back. The kayak can go sideways on the wave. It can wipe out 2 or 3 people because if you're surfing next to somebody, and quite rightly, they don't like unpredictable happenings on the wave. The surfer will be much more controlled. They don't mind so much the surf kayakers because we've got fins on the back of our kayaks and can be a bit more controlled. And we also try and keep a respectable distance from our surfing friends. And I've got to know them over the years, and we get involved in their functions and their fundraising, and they support us and we support them. You know, we look out for each other on the wave. We talk to people who are starting out for the first time about safety and about respecting the environment that they're in and not taking anything for granted in terms of safety and preparation. So we get on well overall, but if we put a foot wrong, they'll tell us straight away, and so we're very careful. The paddles get in the way as well. When you've got a paddle on a kayak, you know, you're paddling, and a surfer doesn't do that. They've just got their hands in the water, so the paddle can be a bit of a hammer sometimes and do a bit of damage.
What restrictions are there for, if we've got any listeners who've got a surfboard and they do a bit of surfing, what restrictions are there for them to come along or not come along and just get on a wave?
There's no restrictions at all, really. There's lots of information on the internet now on surfing the Severn Bore. And I'd say, you know, have a look at all of the information, come down and talk to local people, talk to other surfers, try it out in a safe spot, and you'll know where those safe spots are when you talk to local surfers, and give it a go. Just make sure that you've got your safety in place, that you're not going to be doing it alone, definitely not for the first time, and that you've got a rough idea what you want to achieve, you know, where you're getting in, where you're getting out. So you've maybe checked those out before you go, and somebody knows that what time you're coming back and that they can check that you're back, and give it a go. And there's lots of first timers that do that and have a great time. It's a wonderful experience, but there's only a certain amount of people that stay with it.
If you look at skiing, you've got nursery slopes. Is it the same with the Bore, where there's a particular part of the Bore you could go to just to get a taste of it? You've got sort of 20 miles of Bore, and there are some common spots which are listed and mentioned on the internet that you can just pop in and give it a go. We all keep our spots to ourselves, really, do you?
So it's best to sort of look at.
I imagine everybody got on at the same time, but that's not the case. Well, the same place, same time.
Everybody does. Yeah, everybody does tend to get in at the same spots, but also you've got your personal bits, personal areas where you go, and because there's so much choice on the river, there's plenty of places where you can go and not necessarily have other people around you. But just like surfing on a beach, you know, surfers don't disclose exactly whether they are or everybody turns up. Yeah. But there are some very popular spots on the River Severn. You'll see lots of surfers out. And if you just turn up there and have a chat to them, everybody's very friendly and will give lots of good advice.
What sort of dangers are there that people need to be aware of?
The main dangers on the river are to do with the fact that you've got a 12-mile-an-hour wave pummeling its way up very close to a bank where there are lots of trees, there's lots of debris in the water. And if you're on the front of that tidal wave that's churning up the river, and you can't necessarily get off the front of that wave, if you hit something in front of you, it's going to do a lot of damage. So, surf kayakers, we tend to wear helmets because that's a normal thing for kayakers. Surfers, some do, some don't. The dangers for surfers are more around the fact that they've got a leash tied to their board from their ankle. And if they get that leash, the safety line that means they're not going to lose their board, if they get that leash tied up on a tree on the riverbank as they're surfing, it can pull them back and it can pull them under the water. And the problem is you can't reach down to your ankle when you're getting pulled forward by a force of water to undo your leash, to quick release. So surfers tend to wear their leashes just below the knee and also wear a long leash. And if your leash is just below the knee, it means you can just get your hand down and do the quick release to release the surfboard from you.
Because otherwise you've got the potential of sort of being dragged under.
Yeah, for the sort of 20, 30, 40 seconds after the ball's gone, it's a 12-mile-an-hour wave flooding its way up the estuary. Yeah. And if you're pinned to something, it could be a tree, it could be a floating tree in the middle of the river, it could be a bit of wire sticking out. There's lots of debris in the river, lots of sharp bits. If you can't release yourself, then you're going to stay under the water. And we've had so many near misses on the river, so many surfers. Practically every time we have a tidal wave coming up, there'll be stories of surfers getting pulled under, or a kayak might get in the way and hit a surfer, or a surfer might hit a kayak. And a lot of near misses. Fortunately, only near misses and maybe a bit damage, but nothing too bad. And mainly that's because people try and reinforce the safety as much as possible. It's a very exposed environment. It's cold, it's wet. You've got no safety cover, really, even though we all look out for each other. When the wave goes through, you're gone. You're on the wave. And if you lose the wave, if you're lucky, there'll be somebody behind you to check you, but it's not always going to be the case. So really, you've got to think, am I going to be warm enough? Have I got a good wetsuit? Am I going to be protected enough? If you're in a kayak, if you come outside your kayak, if you capsize and you can't roll, have you got the means to get to the bank and stay warm enough so you don't get hypothermic? It's all of those sort of things you need to think about before going. And also safety boats. There's been a couple of safety boats that have been on the river, or camera boats filming people going on the bore, that have got into trouble and tipped over, and the people have been in the water. So it's a dangerous environment. But so far, touch wood, we managed to keep the word out there and make sure people have thought it through very carefully.
It sounds like if anybody's interested, they need to speak to some experienced people who've done it before several times.
Or definitely as you're getting in, there'll be people there. And if there's nobody there when you're getting into the water, that tells you something straight away, that you're in the wrong place.
Yeah.
If you're getting in to try it, make sure there are other people getting in as well and talk to them.
You mentioned there about the bores that are taking, the natural bores that are going on in different parts of the world. Is there like a sort of international community? Do people do it in different countries and sort of surf the different bores in different countries?
Yes. Yeah. It's getting quite popular now. So locals are getting more interested in their local bores. So there's a few bores on the River Amazon. There's bores in Alaska. There's big bores in China. There's big bores in Indonesia. And so local young people, especially now, are sort of getting access to old surfboards, or get given surfboards by tourists that are coming over to do the bore. And they're beginning to get into that sport. On the bigger bores out there as well, tourism is a big factor now. So people will pay to go there, to go to Indonesia, to go to China just to do a bore. And some of the guys that surf the Severn Bore have been out to surf bores in the Amazon, Indonesia. One guy called Ben, he's just earlier this year actually, he's just been out to Alaska and surfed lots of different bores in Alaska and did some fundraising for it as well when he was there.
Presumably he had a very thick wetsuit.
Yeah, I think it was spring, but yeah, he had a thick wetsuit. He's a really good surfer. He's actually featured on a couple of my videos, the last couple of videos. You'll see him. He's a very smooth surfer. And he makes surfboards. So that's his profession. And he's
good
local.
Way of testing them.
Very good. So he's.
And what about as a spectator? What about as a spectator sport? Is it something that you could go and watch, or is it sort of over before you've had a chance to see it?
It's quite popular to go and watch now that all the tidal information and times are published online by the Environment Agency. It's become quite a big spectator sport, and it's quite good for local business as well, and local pubs and cafes. So lots of people will come down and watch it from set spots, take lots of pictures and videos, get a bit wet sometimes when the water splashes up the bank. And they're very, very interested when they meet people that are surfing the bore. You always have a friendly chat with them and tell them where they're going to have the best spot to see it. So yeah, the interest is built throughout the years, and we have loads of people come down, and that's why there's so many highlights now of videos people put online.
I'll have a conversation with Ben Wilding, and we'll try and time it so that there's a pub, it's a lunchtime, and there's a good place to see next time you're doing it.
Yeah, well, there's some very good pubs and cafes down there, so you'd be very welcome.
Yeah. Climate change. Has there been any effects of climate change since? I mean, you've been doing it, did you say 40 years now?
Yeah, 40 years.
Have you noticed any differences in the bore due to climate change?
I think we've definitely noticed the flooding hasn't changed that much over the years. There's been maybe 2 or 3 really large floods, but what has changed is the volume of water and the amount of times that the river does flood, and not come over the banks, but flood high. So it seems to be getting a bit more often. I mean, the other thing that we've noticed a lot over the years is the water quality has changed quite a lot. The water quality is not good. It's poor. The rivers, in the summer when the river's low, it and actually also in the winter, but mainly in the summer, it can be quite a smelly place. There's a lot of sewage works discharging into it. But over the recent years, actually, the smell is more of farm slurry and things like that. That's the one that really seems to have changed quite a lot. Is this just seems to be more farm effluent coming down the rivers, a lot less fish. I mean, there used to be bountiful amounts of salmon in the river, and they've all gone. I mean, there's hardly any salmon now. And I know the River Wye just down that joins the Severn estuary further down near the Severn Bridge, the River Wye is suffering from really bad pollution from sewage works and runoff from farms and lack of salmon. So, but the sewage and the farm effluent, those are all things that can be treated. It can be changed, yes. And there's a lot of passionate people at the moment that are lobbying, as well as lots of us lobbying to just get everybody to clean their act up and keep these rivers beautiful and as clean as possible. It can be quite dangerous when you're on the water and you're inhaling or swallowing the water. And then lots of people get ill. If you're doing it for 2 or 3 days in a row, which is normal for us because that's a bore cycle will be 2 or 3 days, more often than not, you could get a lurgy, get sick. But quite a good counteractor is drinking a can of Coke. So Coca-Cola is it's very strong, and if you drink that after you come out, then it tends to kill off quite a few bugs.
So what's next for you, Si? Have you done any more challenges with the bore or surfing?
The bore carries on, which is great. So every quarter, there's an opportunity to go down, meet friends, and have a surf. And there's a really nice community of people that I know now, and it's great to see them now and then down there. So that will continue. Surfing on the sea, I still enjoy that immensely. As long as I can keep rolling in the kayak, then I can keep surf kayaking. And the other one is sea kayaking. So I like doing sea kayaking with friends. You can cover longer distances and camp out overnight, do some fishing, make a fire, and enjoy our wonderful coastline around Britain.
Brilliant. So where can people find out more about the Severn Bore and follow you, Si?
With the Severn Bore, if you pop it into the search engine, then you'll get some really interesting information, which gives you the history and the geography and the safety factors. And if you delve a bit deeper and go onto YouTube, you can find lots of different people that put videos up of the bore. I do it as well. I think just put my name in, Si Cale, and they pop up. They're fun records of an amazing phenomenon.
Well, Si, this has been a really fascinating conversation. It's been interesting to learn more about sea kayaking, in particular about the Severn Bore. I think many of us have seen the bore on TV. Not many of us have spoken to someone who's actually experienced it, so thank you for that. My guest today has been Si Cale. Si is an experienced sea kayaker and regular surfer of the Severn Bore. You can find out more about the Severn Bore and Si in the show notes. Thanks for coming on the show, Si.
You're welcome.